Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Chiza, host of the Meet Your Author podcast, where we celebrate African authors and have bookish conversations. Joining me today is Ruby Yayra Goka from Ghana. She's the author of Even When Your Voice Shakes. Who is Ruby?
I think I'm just someone who loves books.
Yeah.
Okay, I love books. I love reading. A perfect day for me would be a day with food and books. I'll be in bed all day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fantasy me. But the real me is someone who has to go to work. I'm a dentist. I write in the evenings. I'm not too much of a very social person, but then I have my moments. I love to travel.
Yeah.
And I think, in a nutshell, that's me.
Okay. I read somewhere in one of your interviews when they asked you about what mode of transport would you like to use to travel. And I think you mentioned, of course, planes, because you hate the whole traveling thing where you have to sit for long. And
I hate the journey in between. Unless it's a new place, then like you're wowed by the scenery and everything. But then if you've been on the route a number of times, then it kind gets kind of boring a little. So if we had teletransportation, like what the Jetsons have, you are here 1 minute, you are there. Like I'm totally for that.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that someone is out there creating something with all the technology advancement happening. Someone will find.
Yeah.
Let's get into your book, Even When Your Voice Shakes. I must say that for me, this is your first work that I'm reading. And when I read it, I loved it because I love reading young adult fiction or YA fiction, like they call it. And I never understand why people don't like reading it. For me, it's so light. And how do you get into writing for young adults or even for young readers? Because I don't think you write specifically for young adults. I think for more your previous work, you've been writing for young readers and then gotten into young adults along the way.
I tried my hand at writing. I've always written a little all through, when I was younger in school and all those things. But then that time was stories that you share with your friends, with your family, like your small network of people. So I've always written side as well. There wasn't anything I took really very seriously. And when I was in medical school, I was part of our editorial team as well. And so I wrote stories there, but then I never put my name to the story, so I submitted them anonymously or they were printed anonymously because I couldn't I couldn't bear like people the feedback. I thought I wasn't too confident in myself. Let me just say that. So I just submit anonymously. Then after school, there was this advert in one of the newspapers here and was calling for it was the Better Word competition, and they were calling for young adult writers. At that time, I had submitted one of my manuscripts, one of my very first manuscripts to a publisher and was in the process of being published. So that was disfigured. So I thought, well, I've written for adults. Let me try my hand at, children's book. And the mistake I made was that I thought writing for children, reading for children is really easy. So I thought writing for children would be easy as well. So I just kept delaying. And then when it was 2 weeks at the deadline, and I started writing, and then the whole story was done in 5 pages. And I think they were playing for about 80 plus pages or something, so I was really hot. So I took time off work and actually sat down. I went back and reread some old young adults books just to get into how the story flows and all that. And on the day of deadline, then you had to go and submit a physical copy. Mm-hmm. So on the deadline day, I now had to go and print it and, rush across towns. They actually missed the deadline by a few minutes, but they accepted the submission, and I placed third in that first competition. So I think that just spurred me on, and placing third, and it was quite a prestigious award. So it opened doors to other publishers and other people in the industry. So subsequently it was easier to write. And I think I went into children and young adults because, like you said, the stories are not so complex. They are they just follow a certain trajectory. You get to the point quickly, and I don't know. I think I just enjoy writing for that age group. Maybe because it takes me back to that time as well. So the competition ran for I think 7 years or 8 years. I don't remember. So each year I submitted a manuscript, and each year I was in the first three. So I think that's award competition. The best award competition is what started it for me.
Wow, that's amazing, because I feel like with every creative person, not just even writers, when you're doing your work, you want to have some form of validation. And I feel like when the prizes come in, that keeps you going. You're like, yeah, I think I'm doing something right. Mm-hmm. So let's get into how do you get to even when your voice shakes? Because I know you mentioned somewhere that
it was something I heard on the news, and the story just stuck with me. It was of a much younger girl. I think she was below 10 years old, and a neighbor had defiled her, had sent her to get something. When she had come, he had taken her to an uncompleted building and defiled her. Told her mom, and her mom went to report at the police station, and her dad was not around. When he came back, the police were investigating, had gone to arrest their neighbor and all that. And the father said he didn't want to pursue the case anymore. And then he asked that they settled the matter at home, So that story, the injustice of it just stuck to me.
Yeah.
And after a while, I think I just kept, after a while, just the image of a melee and someone with, and for me, when I'm writing, sometimes I started, so then Amele's voice started speaking to me, and then the story started outlining itself, and I knew I just had to write it.
Okay, because when I read it, it's very light to read. I like that it's light, even if it has quite heavy themes, but it's a light read and it's really enjoyable. When I was reading it, I was so happy. I was like, I miss this sort of writing, which is just so beautiful and light, and you enjoy it, but the author still puts the message across, and you get it, and you appreciate that. Because even with your characters, I love that they're so relatable. I remember seeing Amadi, and then her best friend, and then that Amali's boyfriend is a taxi tout. That's something we don't see often. We don't see that often. It's always some middle class thing going on in most novels, but these are common people that we see and meet every day. People selling wares on the street or during traffic jam. Like, that really stuck with me. I was like, oh, all right, this is different. It's very different and relatable. So thank you for choosing to go that way. I don't know if it was a hard decision for you to make, to center your characters that way.
It was a bit more based on the story I'd heard, but then I decided to increase the age, make her a teenager, because I was also hoping that this book would start the conversation around consent. So I was also hoping it starts the conversation around consent in young adults, catch them early before they become adults. So it wasn't too hard to place some early age. I think it just evolved, I think, organically.
Okay. And I wonder, because I know that you mentioned something about the editorial process in the conversation, in the book club conversation that I attended. You mentioned a bit about the editorial process and how working with, I think this is a US edition.
So this one is the US edition.
Okay, that's the US edition.
Yes. So the content is the same story, but then there's some things which had to be edited for the US market, because this was I saw this as a bit too graphic, so we had to tone it down a little.
Okay, and I wanted us to talk about that. I attended a festival last year, the Momentum Festival in Scotland, and that's one of the things that they were discussing. during one of the workshops for young adult fiction, where they were saying that writers need to be able to give trigger warnings to their readers, like expect this, expect that. And when you mentioned that about your editing process, I wondered though how that works, because in a context, even if you had, said whatever you said about the different characters, I feel like would still have gotten it, because I don't know if it's right to say we're used to graphic situations. Is that right? and seeing that now with the Americans, they choose to, reduce on the graphics for their readers. As a writer, what do you think about that?
Well, so I think it depends on the culture, the setting of the story. Because in the Ghanaian edition, her mom slaps her, really hits her hard, and she actually falls back. And in Ghana, that is normal. It's not, I mean, if you go to school and say, my mom hits me or my mom beats you, no one is going to raise an eyebrow or say anything, But apparently, it's a big thing. Like, you just can't hit somebody like that. So I was actually tone that down for the audience in the US, and then for the bedroom scene as well, just to tone it down a little. So I think it depends on the context and the culture of that area of that region. Okay, so for someone like Ameli who used to share a room with her parents, she knew what intimacy was. She knew what her parents were up to because it was the same room. And I would say that cuts across for all children in Ghana, but then in some areas there'll be people. I mean, that's a real life situation that happens. So we can't pretend and say some kids don't know about this or some, But then I understood where they were coming from. Okay, in Ghana, it's not really a big thing if your mom hits you or if you're punished by we've outlawed corporal punishments in school, but then again, it's not, no one would raise eyebrows really, So I think it depends on the area and the context of the story.
Yeah, thank you for that. I totally agree, because in Uganda it's the same thing. Punishment, really, if my mom slapped me, no big deal. Life goes on. Life goes on. That's very interesting though. Did you enjoy writing the book? Because I know as a reader, I really, really enjoyed the book. Of course, I felt it was a bit like the ending was too rushed, but I realized also that it's the age group that you're writing for. You don't want them to get lost in the details. Yet we as adults, we like those details. I want to see what happens when they go to court. What did the judge say?
Initially, it was going to be a 2-part series. Okay. But the second part, so in the first part, both General and Saeed abused her. Okay, so in this edition, that's what happened. But then the one you were reading is just General. So initially, it was supposed to be there's supposed to be a sequel to it, which was going to be Saeed's story, because I liked Saeed. Okay,
me too. I liked him.
But then my point was, and now with peer pressure, I don't know if this happens in Uganda as well, but in Ghana for a time there were young teenage boys gang raping the girls in their class and videotaping it, and some people would come out, oh, but I know this boy, he's not like that. You understand? Yeah. So there's supposed to be a second part to the book where it was going to be Saeed's point of view. So we like Saeed, we know he's at heart is a good person, but then I just wanted a second scenario where good people make mistakes sometimes, but that's not like a cross you have to bear your whole life. So the second part with the court and with everything will be from Saeed's point of view. Okay. That was initially what was supposed to be, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, initially when I read the book, there were, what they call what did writers call them? There were signposts. So I actually thought Saeed was going to be the culprit because he was just too friendly. It's like, I think this boy, So it was a nice surprise that instead it was General who did it. But if Said had done it, I wouldn't have been surprised. I've been like, yeah, I saw it coming. He was too friendly. He was just being, if part two had come out, I'd have been like, yes, I knew it. I knew he was going to do it. But yeah.
That was again, the editorial process. So when it was in this book, that was my plan that the second part would be of Saeed and his sort of. Again, with the US version, we had to. So there's a thing for when you're writing for young people, your book has to have a message of hope, and there shouldn't be so many like bad things, So instead of having both of them, we have one good person who was maybe in a bad place at the time. So that's how come Saeed didn't do it. So even though he didn't do it, now the case of wasn't really, as strong as if he had been taking part in the act itself. So there's a back and forth, and we just that.
Okay, I like that you've mentioned that. I wonder though, how do you relate the first edition to the second edition? Because even if the second edition is published in the US, I'm sure it's in Ghana, right? And it's being sold alongside the first edition.
So it's unless you purchase on Amazon,
okay,
they don't have rights to sell in Ghana, that edition, because it's basically a story. But then there is the Nigerian edition is being sold here. Okay. But then most people who read the first one have read this, so yeah, it's really the same story.
And who published the Nigerian edition?
Reader Books.
Oh, okay. So because when I read the book, was it easy for you writing this book? Because you've talked about the inspiration for it. Did you want to spark conversation around those topics, and have those conversations been sparked since the book was released?
Yeah, I should think so. I should think when people recommend it, young adults are talking about it. So I think at least that aspect of it is being met. And like I said, it was the book practically wrote itself.
Yeah.
I mean, Amelie, I knew what her thoughts were. I knew, and I knew where it would end. I knew what happened to her. It practically wrote itself.
Okay. And for you, would you say that is it easy? Because I know in Uganda it's not easy to get books onto the curriculum. Is it easy in Ghana, say, to get your book onto the curriculum? Because it's a very important book. No, it's not. That's very sad.
No, it's not.
That's very sad, because this is it's a book that's very important and speaks about topics that young adults are facing.
Yeah, but then it's a long process, and I think somewhere along the way we just gave up.
Oh, you tried doing it before?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's their loss. I hope more parents are able to get their kids the book to read, because for me, I would really love to get my sister, who is 18, to get her the book to read it and hear her, her thoughts on the book, but also on the themes in the book, because you raise such important themes that I wish when I was younger, or when I was 18, 17, 16, I wish there were books like that. I mean, we're reading Mills and Bond. Why?
Yeah, I know. Same thing.
Why were we reading those books at that age? But I'm so grateful that we have more young adult fiction coming out now. So we don't have an excuse. At least I know I'll always have books to point people to, so that they start conversations going. And I don't know, what has been your experience writing for young readers, especially in Ghana? And I wonder if all your books have been self-published?
No, so I've actually only self-published one book.
Okay.
So remember I told you about the competition. So it was easy getting publishers after I won the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I find it easier, for some reason, I find it easier to write for younger adults than for adults. So that's how come I have more young adults books. So it's not really a difficult thing for me.
Okay.
The challenge is there's been a change in our education system. We now have a free senior high school policy. Previously, we could sell books directly to schools, and the book would be added to the school the students' fees. So would contact the headmasters. They would give a sample or copies of the books to the English teachers. They would read, select what they wanted. So and then there was a policy where each student had to read 3 books a term, like supplementary books. So if your book got on that list, then you could then you'd make you'd have a wider audience and all that. But with the new policy, you can't sell to schools anymore. So publishers are a bit hesitant to publish, to take on new books now, because they still have old stock they haven't sold. So that's been the challenge now, selling, how to sell, because you can't go through the school system anymore. Yeah, but for the writing part, that's not a problem. It's how to distribute it that's not a problem.
I think that's an issue Africa-wide, book distribution. People are writing, but how to get books across borders, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we crack it eventually. Do you think that for you, publishing, even when your voice shakes with an American publisher, do you think that's a breakthrough in your writing?
Maybe it's a step. I don't think it's a breakthrough.
Yeah.
It's just a leading somewhere. So we're yet to see where it's going. It's not yet, but hopefully, I hope it picks up. Or I hope,
Okay. All right. And then when it comes to your 9 to 5, so to speak, the dentistry, how are you able to balance that with the writing? Because I know that for me, having a 9 to 5 and then doing Meet Your Author, some days it's overwhelming that I take a break and don't look at Meet Your Author project for a while. And when I have the strength, I get back.
Yeah, so the main thing for me is I don't write every day.
Okay.
I don't make it. There's some people who are so disciplined, so focused. I have to write 2 pages every day. I have to write 10,000, 1,000 words. I don't do that. So I write when I have time. If I come home and I'm too tired and I don't feel like it, I don't. But then if I'm really into the story, like that's usually in the middle to the end, when I can now see when I'm starting. I think the biggest thing for me is when I'm starting. But then when I'm really into the flow of things, then I don't know, I just get like this adrenaline boost or something that I don't even feel tired. Yeah. So it's when the book is done, I finally feel the exhaustion. So I just think it varies from person to person. But generally, I don't write every day. I only write when the edge is so overwhelming. And when I need a break, I take a break and rest.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I'm glad that you're able to do that. I also do that. I don't write every day, but I try to at least a week won't pass when I've not written something. I always try to pace myself. I pace myself. All right. When you were writing, even when your voice shook, were you listening to anything? Were you reading anything for inspiration?
No, when I was writing, no. But then previously, I had read, like many years ago, I'd read Speak by Ruby Halse Anderson. And I think that's one book that really stayed with me. So if anything at all, maybe I wanted my book to follow those lines, or not really follow those lines, but then I really liked that story. It's one story that stayed with me. But then when I was reading, no. It was just a news item that just, kept the injustice of history, just kept me going.
Yeah. All right. Could you mention the author of Speak again?
Laurie Halse Anderson.
Laurie.
I can send it on IG.
Oh, thank you so much. That would be great. Okay, and then which African writer did you ever read first and you fell in love and that started your journey?
Yes. So I think I don't know if it was my first, but then I do remember The Great Pawns by Elechi and Amadi. Mm-hmm. I read that when I was in junior high school, and I just I think I go back and read that book once a year. I just love that story. I love it so much. And then I read Things Fall Apart and all that. But then my first young adult book by an African was the Jasmine Candle by Christine Botchwey. I'll send you that as well. Yeah, and I totally adore that book, the Jasmine Candle, because that's a YA book. It was my best YA, And I'd read, all the African, not most, but then my dad used to have African writer series. So I used to read those as well. But then these were younger people, and it was set in Ghana, and she was describing Kenke and most of our local foods, and I was just like totally in love with that book. So the Jasmine Candle and Spears Down and the Great Ponds, those are some of the books that I try and read once a year because I just love those books.
Nice.
So I'll send you those later.
Thank you. I'm so glad that the first YA book that you read that really got to you was by an African writer. Imagine, I read.
And the surprising thing turns out that she was also a dentist.
Oh wow!
And that's what I knew to do with my life. So that was really Thank you, Christine.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. What a coincidence!
Yeah.
I think when I was reading about you and your writing and as well as your practice, I was just like, you make it possible. You know how we always think that you can't have it all, so to speak. Like you concentrate on one thing, don't do the other. But you showed me that it's possible. You can actually pursue two things and do them really well. And this doesn't take away that, of course, that the hours could be long, but you're doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's really great. That's amazing. So thank you so much for writing the book. Do you have more work in progress?
So I have been next, and I'm just getting like a hazy outline yet. I don't know where the story is going, but I know the main character is a girl with a chronic pain issue. So it's going to have something to do with I'm not too sure yet, but it's going to have something to do with menstruation. Ooh. Because for some people that pain can be really terrible.
Yes.
And and it's not something we talk about as, oh, you're a woman, you're a girl, know.
Yeah.
But some people, it could be more than, it might be endometriosis, it could be some other thing, but then everyone keeps brushing it aside. And because it's not a physical pain you see with your eyes, so all just, so I'm still thinking about something around those lines, and hopefully more of the story comes to me.
Hopefully it does. I'm really excited for you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for joining us today. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and enjoy a bookish ride.